Well, hello and a warm welcome back to the Andrew Eborn Show. Now, one of the highlights for me of 2020 was my next guest, who's making a delightful return appearance. Please welcome Charles Spencer. How are you, Charles?
Very well, Andrew, and I thoroughly enjoyed our interview last time, so I'm delighted we got a reprise, and I love seeing over your shoulder a stack of my books.
And I love absolutely, the best books, Tower of Babel as well. We do it all here. It's got to be fantastic. Now, last time we spoke about that seismic moment in history that changed the course of the crown forever, didn't it? And tell me just in a nutshell then about the White Ship and why it's so important.
Yes, well, it's known as the Titanic of the medieval times, but it's actually way more important than that. I'm not belittling the loss of the Titanic, but this is of a different order altogether. It was the time when effectively the flower of the English and Norman aristocracy got onto one mighty ship, the White Ship. But the most important part of this was that it was the King Henry I's only son and heir, William Aetheling, who was on board, and he died, and that was the problem, because you end up with there being no heir to the throne, and it ends with 20 years of bloody civil war, and then the Plantagenets take the throne, and then that is the problem.
Yeah, and as you say, it was the great and the good of the time, wasn't it? I mean, 350 extra people, the nobles, the sisters, and so on and so forth. History did change forever as a result of that one fateful night.
Well, it's extraordinary to think that one event on a rocky part of Normandy could change the history of England. I mean, if this hadn't happened and William had succeeded to the throne as planned, we wouldn't have even heard of Richard the Lionheart or Magna Carta. I mean, it is astonishing. Yeah. But this is what happened. It was too much was riding on the back of one young man. He was 17 when he perished. Very brave man, a young man. He was getting away in the one rowing boat, the lifeboat on the White Ship, when he heard his sister calling for help, and he ordered the crew to turn around and go and save her. Then, you know, what I love about these sorts of research projects for a book like this is I found out nobody could swim. Right. So when these drowning people saw this small boat going by, they tried to clamber on board, and they took the boat and the prince down, and they all perished, apart from, luckily for history and for me, one eyewitness. So, you know, it was an astonishing loss.
Yeah, Beryl, the butcher, as we said beforehand. And I think his sister was actually mocking him as well. I remember in the book, it wasn't just come and help me. She was really mocking him as well.
Yes, what sort of man are you to leave your sister to drown? And I think that would have an effect, yes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Tragic events. Now, I understand that was the catalyst, obviously, to your fantastic book. Writing a book about the most disastrous sea wreck in history is one thing. Going on a dive 900 years later to try and find the thing is something else. How did that come about?
Yes, well, I was working with this fascinating group. They do digital archaeology, and I've been toying with them on a couple of other projects, and I've been actually they're very involved with the Sutton Hoo, the famous Anglo-Saxon monument there, and we decided to go and have a look. And we did a lot of working out beforehand. We knew where the rock was, which the White Ship foundered on. We worked out all sorts of tidal aspects from then and from more recent time. And so we'd really narrowed it down to sort of the size of 5 football pitches, put these 2 divers over, and within half an hour, they found under the mud what is an ancient wreck. And the main piece they found was just over 3 meters long. And what we know from that is that it is of the right period. The construction.
And that is extraordinary, isn't it? Because you did your research on that. You had a look. It's the right nails. It's the right copper. It's the right bits of metal. And Roger, who was a contemporary of yours at Oxford, wasn't he? Is that how you met him, the director? He is like a little boy at Christmas. It really was. He was sort of saying, I had no idea. It's going to be like looking under the Christmas tree, not knowing what you could find.
It was extraordinary. You know, to be honest, Andrew, I thought if we were lucky, we might find a few nails, you know, because it's wood and it's 900 years. But if this is the right wreck, and we're going back in July to check, if it is, then it's been preserved under the mud for a very long time. And I love it. You know, we've done the research on what else has gone down on that piece of coastline. And the 2 major wrecks of that period are from only 200 years ago. This is not that. Yeah. It's a very substantial ship from ancient times. So we have a chance of it being the white ship. I won't be popping the champagne cork until it's confirmed by science, but I really think we have got a chance here of having reconnected with a part of maritime history that has always had a profound impact on me. I've always loved the story.
Oh, ever since you were a boy, this has been the story. And we understand it is, as you describe it, it is Game of Thrones meets Titanic, but far more important, and also a bit of sliding doors. That sort of extraordinary moment is quite incredible, because it would be, if this is the white ship, this would be one of the major finds in recent history, wouldn't it?
Well, I think it would. Look, I mean, people obviously hadn't really heard of the white ship. I mean, I found that it's just dropped out of, while the taste for history in terms of syllabus has changed so much over the last sort of few decades, and most children are brought up on a diet of Hitler and Henry VIII. Henry I and the white ship has disappeared into the background. But I like to, that's what I try and do in my books, is reconnect with people or events that I think have been wrongly forgotten, because they're so interesting. I mean, I find them so interesting. I want to share them with people. And when I sit down to write these books, I mean, not with any pomposity, but I just think, God, I really hope I can open people's eyes to this, because it shouldn't be forgotten. And the white ship, if that is part of the white ship, how amazing would that be? Because then we could put it somewhere, given the right permissions. I have no idea about that, but we could hopefully put it in a museum and have school children, and obviously adults, but school children ignite their minds with the story of this incredible tale, and maybe make them think more about the past and wanting to know more.
It brings history alive. And when you were on your diving expedition, looking out at those rocks, which would have been the same rocks as they saw on the white ship, how did that make you feel?
It was very eerie. You know, we arrived at low tide on purpose. We had to have slack water because the tides are very strong around there, difficult for the divers. So we arrived just as everything was flattening out. And there looming is the Quilleboeuf Rock, which brought the white ship down. And actually, I mean, I had seen it from the shore, but I hadn't seen it from the sea, and it's much worse. You feel very vulnerable. Even in a modern craft, you feel, my goodness, if you hit that, you would be in big trouble. And the problem on the night in November, it was around midnight and a November night in the Channel, you would have had no warning. And I think the rock was just under the surface at that point of the tide, and you would not win an argument with that rock if you were in a wooden vessel. It's a dramatic piece of sculpture, really.
And it's a constellation of rocks, isn't it? You've got the main rock and you've got the little rocks around it as well. And the other interesting thing is that Henry himself hadn't really set sail later than September beforehand. So it's November the 25th. It was later than normal. As you say, it was an enormous vessel, and a bit of bravado and a lot of drink was involved as to why they had the accident.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So first of all, what I hadn't really appreciated, because I hadn't seen the rock at such low tide, it was studded with smaller rocks. Any of them could have taken the ship down, I reckon. But anyway, I'm not a marine archaeologist. But you're right. Henry had never, people were very superstitious about the sea anyway, and they were very wary of it. I looked at some of the writings from the medieval period, and the sea is treated with enormous fear. And people appreciated its beauty and all that, but it was an unknown. People didn't know. I mean, an experienced sea captain would have a rough idea of what was going on, but everyone else just thought it was a terrifying thing to have to go on a ship. And you didn't do it in the winter. I mean, I did it, when I did it in early June, we were so lucky. We went from the south coast of England to Barfleur, which is the nearest, just off Barfleur, Norman town. And we did it in 3.5 hours in a fast boat. Right. But even then, you know, you feel there is a point where you're halfway across the channel and you think, my goodness, you can't see land, obviously, in either direction. And imagine the limited knowledge that the medieval mind had. Every expedition was a major event. And in fact, one of the things that the monks who chronicled the demise of the white ship picked up on was the fact that you're absolutely right, a lot of the people on board were drunk. And when the monks came to give the traditional blessing for a voyage, the sort of drunken buffoons on board chased them away. And in an era where people saw God's hand in everything, this insult to God was seen as one of the reasons for the subsequent disaster.
They sort of work backwards. I mean, we look at this beforehand as you sort of say, well, what's the story? Well, God must have his hand in it somewhere. So this is the reason. You shoot off the monks. You work on that sort of basis. The other thing, I mean, you say you're right to look at the medieval mind, because they were fearful, not just of the sea and the rocks and so on and so forth, but what might lurk beneath.
They had no idea. Obviously, I mean, it's logical. How could they know? They had nothing submersible. So they thought that the sea was full of all sorts of animals, sea elephants and sea goats, which are obviously very frightening if you believe in them, and sea lions, as in lions, not what we call sea lions. So they just assumed that everything that could possibly be evil was under the sea. So you needed God's blessing to navigate.
I really hope you find some of those in your search. I hope it's rather like the Loch Ness Monster.
Yes, well, if I find, what could be better for Octopus TV than some...
Come on, I'll sponsor it. I'll throw some money. We could do. The other thing as well, though, is it had the king's treasures on board, didn't it?
Yes, this is the interesting part, because I think if some of the people had stayed on board, they would have had a better chance of survival than cascading into the channel in the winter.
Yeah.
Or near winter. And effectively, there was the Royal treasure chest there, obviously enormously heavy. And so that settled on the rock while the ship split open and bits went everywhere. And we end up with this ridiculous situation where the most valuable objects are saved, but not the human lives. The next day, the fishermen of Barfleur arrived and took, for the king, they didn't steal it for themselves, the treasure that had been left there. So yeah, it does make you wonder if people had stayed on board. Of course, it was panic. It was drunken panic, and they tried to swim for it and didn't know how to swim.
They couldn't swim. They had the wrong clothes on. There was cold water shock, all those sort of terrible things that have a look at. You're going to go back in July, have a look. You can go back with all sorts of equipment. So we can do 3D mapping.
Yes.
You can even plot the course and so on and so forth. Really,
and more than that, it's a magnetology thing. So one of the people who's with us is the professor of magnetology at Oxford.
What an attractive title, they would say.
And I feel so old. I mean, she's half my age and she's already a professor of this, but she's brilliant. And she can spot things obviously under the mud what was very interesting to me, again, going back to my point that this is a wrongly forgotten event, was that we couldn't find any record of anyone taking a serious scientific look at this. I'm sure casual divers have had a look, with as a bit of leisure, but nobody's tackled this in a scientific way. So that was fascinating.
A brilliant time. 2 days after the dive, the glorious paperback version of your wonderful book, rip-roaring read, as we say, was published. Now the bestseller. Success, in a nutshell then, why are you so successful?
Well, if I am, I think there's two things. One is I'm writing for ordinary people. I have a friend called Andrew who lived in the same house as me at Oxford for 2 years. He reads one book every summer. And I'm always thinking, I'm going to write the book that he might pick up at Heathrow. And I'm not bombarding people with facts, although hopefully the facts are all straight. And I think the main reason that the books sell is I had 10 years of really useful apprenticeship working as a correspondent in America on national network TV. And they drilled into us, I was writing my own scripts, of course, write to picture. So when I write a paragraph, I'm seeing it visually. And I think that helps the reader, It's not, I hate history books where it's just endless facts and I can't stay awake. I have the attention of a gnat. And I want things that are going to jump off the page. Actually, quite interesting you ask, Andrew, because I find sometimes when I think, well, that's not worthy of being in the book, some fact which is so quirky that it's ridiculous. And then it won't leave me. It keeps tapping me on the shoulder at night and saying, I need to be in that book, because if you're finding it fascinating, it needs to be in. So for instance, in this book, I came across, there's a woman in the early part of the book who is the daughter of the man who kills the real Macbeth. And I thought, well, I've got to find out what the real Macbeth was like. And it's only a couple of paragraphs, but he wasn't anything like the neurotic, henpecked monster of Shakespeare's play. He was actually an incredibly successful, sensitive, decent King of Scotland who traveled to Rome in great style and impressed the Pope by being so generous to the poor. And I have to put that in because that is interesting to the general reader. And it may be slightly off course, but it has to go in.
Those off course moments, it's the glorious characters, it's the incredible research that you do, and it uncovers those little treasures, if you like, that make history appealing. It's not a dry regurgitation of fact. It's a fantastic thriller. Every single page is a page turner. Charles, it's been an absolute delight. Look forward to coming back, having you back after the next dive with the treasures and the presents that you can find.
Yes. Thank you, Andrew. Can I say what a pleasure it is to be interviewed by you, because you have an incredibly brilliant mind for remembering things. So we can sort of skedaddle along at quite a pace. So it's quite a great privilege for me. So thank you.
Well, thank you. We're all now for a surfeit of lampreys, and we'll do all of that.
Indeed. All right. Thanks so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So thank you again to my very special guest, Lord Charles Spencer, and good luck with the next dive early in July. He will be back on the programme. If you have any comments or any thoughts on the programme, you can write to me at guests@octopustv.com. That's guests@octopustv.com. Don't forget to follow me at Andrew Eborn, @octopustv, and don't forget you can subscribe on all of the usual platforms. More platforms than Paddington, but most of all, get yourself a copy of this. It is absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much for joining me. I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.